Hello, I'm George from Ireland. So here I'm on Robben Island, and you can check out the Kramat, this Muslim shrine. So the Netherlands then ruled much of Indonesia, bits of Malaysia, even small parts of South India, as well as Sri Lanka. There's a lot of Muslim subjects, and those who rebelled against them were sometimes brought here, thousands of miles from home, would never get back. One of them was the Prince of Madura, Pangeru. So eventually he died here. So this is actually not a mosque, it looks like one, it's his grave. And then Haji Mataram, who did so much to establish Islam in South Africa, was buried here. There are various other shrines for renowned Muslim scholars around the Cape, and people, they form a ring, and people say, oh, that protects, Muslims say that protects this area from natural disasters, no earthquakes and things like that. It might be something to do with tectonic plates, but forgive me for being a rationalist. Okay, here we are, getting off our guide buses. There's only one race, the human race. Robert Sobukwe was a black professor, and he was instrumental in establishing the Pan-Africanist Congress. And he was one of the first prisoners here for his anti-apartheid activities. The PAC was outlawed, the African National Congress was banned, and membership was punished by up to 8 years imprisonment and so on. Even didn't do anything, as in didn't set off a bomb or plan to, or slap someone in the face, simply membership of that. Okay, so I better hurry on over here with the people in my group. Look at this razor wire up top. You were not easily getting out of that one. And our guide had been a member of the PAC, but he was in prison, though not here. So there we go. And then you can see this prison wouldn't have been terribly easy to get out of. So it's a fairly rocky, sandy island. But sports facilities, what, rugby posts and football goals, I wonder whether they would have had those when their prisoners were here, but they were doing hard, tedious work. I remember Nelson Mandela said the price for prisoners' families was almost too high, and he's working here when he's informed that his son had been killed in a car accident, and he hadn't seen his child for several years, and that was it. Overcome by grief and guilt, and had he taken the wrong path in life, had he just stayed on as a lawyer, he could have prospered and spent time with his family and had a happy family life. We now know that eventually he got out. I mean, obviously at the time of the trial, he was widely expected to be executed. And we got the life sentence. Obviously we had no idea that apartheid would come to an end. It would ever become free. All the suffering might have been to no purpose. Apartheid might have lasted much longer. He could easily have died in prison. So he had no guarantee that all his sacrifice would actually lead to something, would come to fruition. At that time, the system seemed fairly durable. Sanctions only just getting going in the 60s. The sporting boycott from 1970, because the South African government wouldn't allow people of different races to be on the same team, or whites to play against non-whites. Now they sort of had to in the Olympics, but then they're out of the Olympics and blah, blah, blah. The cultural boycott, but the totality of that brought down apartheid. What about Umkhonto Wesizwe, where the armed wing of the ANC? Some would say it's actually fairly ineffective. I mean, it did kill a few hundred people, but it was mainly the Cubans or the MPLA in Angola that helped to defeat the South African army. There was this growing sense that they were living on borrowed time, that apartheid couldn't last forever. They were forced to make concessions. It was a sort of Thomas Babington Macaulay thing, reform that you may preserve. The apartheid government making concessions, not because they wanted to, but they realised their only chance of survival was a judicious blend of concession and repression. Repression on its own wasn't going to work. So look, here's the lavatory block, and there's this very slightly slippery floor. So the thing is, don't let the prisoners have shoes sometimes, so if it comes to a fight, the guards have got the advantage because they've got some traction, whereas the prisoners don't. And then you can see the barred windows up high. So that we're on bus for quite a long time. We would like to walk along, but it's several kilometres along the island. It would have been too slow. How would you get all the people to the place on time? And they get thousands of people through here each day. There are many sailings. I have to cancel some sailings when the weather is too rough. So yeah, the people who were detained here, they had no idea they'd ever see the mainland again. But obviously you could say, well, what about the tens of thousands of political prisoners who really were political prisoners all across Africa? Who was the Nelson Mandela of the Democratic Republic of Congo? or Idi Amin, or the Central African Republic, or Chad, or a whole host of African tyrannies. And Mandela, though he was a very good man in some ways, he ended up as being an apologist for the most appalling tyrannies all across Africa. Now, to paraphrase Oscar Wilde, anti-imperialism is the last refuge of the scoundrel. So the most monstrous tyrants could get away with anything. Any crime was virtuous in Mandela's view, so long as you said you're doing it for anti-imperialism. And that's why he was a cheerleader for Muammar al-Gaddafi, the Libyan tyrant, maniac with his cult of personality. Now, admittedly, even he did a few good things to develop his country. Okay, so you see what it's like. Fairly barren, rather dispiriting to be trapped here for all those years. And Nelson Mandela said that after a while, the edge came off the relations with the guards. You know, they were almost amicable. But then he met some new people who've been caught, who've been caught fighting against the apartheid government, who were ferocious, were much more filled with fighting spirit, I mean, partly because they were younger. Another thing is, Nelson Mandela survived, was it sort of 29 years of detention, from his 1961 arrest to his 1990 release. A prisoner wouldn't have lasted 29 years in just about any other African country, more like 29 months, because conditions were so appalling. So, I mean, obviously apartheid should never have been here, I'm not suggesting that. But he was adequately fed, provided with medical care. He was never beaten when he was here, according to himself. I know afterwards in the 60s, the South African police got really rough and severely beat up a lot of detainees, and outright torture was used, not infrequently. So yeah, the Sharpeville massacre took place in 1960 over the pass laws. It's ridiculous to say that you have to have a pass to go around, only if you're black, not if you're white. I better switch it off now.